As an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblower Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people are going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the stone wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle, thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on Rumble. Rumble.com/amradpod is where you can find us. And if you have found us, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are, if you happen to be watching not live, we thank you for joining us today. It's a Tuesday. We're coming to you 0830 live on the Eastern Seaboard. But as aforementioned, you can catch up to the old episodes anytime you want here on Rumble. And when you do, make sure that you do smash the thumbs up and follow the channel. And if you want to subscribe, we appreciate it. If you listen to the podcast on iTunes or any of those other platforms, make sure you subscribe there so you can get the updates when we drop the new episodes of the show Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Here I am in my bunker in Florida, bearing down, looking at the end of the barrel of Hurricane Milton. It sounds like an incel who wears thick glasses, but Category 5 hurricane. We're going to see if we're going to get through it. It's supposed to make landfall here the next day, but we're on the east side here in the Friend household. I think we'll be okay, but we have hunkered down nonetheless, and I'm excited to come to you and to talk to my friend, because who knows, maybe this will be the last time we ever get a chance to speak. My friend, of course, is Garrett O'Boyle at GOB Actuals, where you find him on social media. I don't know, man. You never know. Apparently, they can control the weather, according to some of our congressional representatives. Maybe they're directing it straight at my house because the FBI just didn't feel like coming to pick me up at 6 a.m.
You know what I think, Steve? I think not only are they controlling the weather right above your domicile, but they also have a directed energy weapon pointed right at you, too. I mean, the hurricane
That would
aside,
explain the nice, healthy hue in my skin. I'm getting a little bit of extra UV rays.
the hurricane aside, Steve, I just don't think you're going to make it out of this one alive. Sorry, buddy.
It's all right.
I was hoping you would go for like a Milton Friedman quote, though, but of course you went trans death cult instead, which, hey, always acceptable here on the American Radicals Podcast.
Well, I was trying to link it to some leadership failures, which is what the subject was today. I don't know who was in charge of naming hurricanes. That's a fail.
Yeah.
But the directed weather as weapons allegations that have been percolating amongst people who purport to be our elected officials, our betters, right? People in positions to make the decisions for the country. That's a cell phone. That's a loss. So the topic of the day is who is in charge, like who's actually running things, and just have an assortment of various leadership failures. We've talked about leadership before. We did it on a podcast with George Hill because you guys came from the military background, and that's something that is so important there. Plus, I couldn't talk that day; my voice was gone. So had George come on and talk about that. But the voice is firing on all cylinders today. So I got a list of different pieces, and it's different levels of leadership. And when I say leadership, I mean elected leadership, not necessarily somebody who's just assuming that position like one would want someone to do. But these are people who raise their hands, put their name on a ballot to get elected or were appointed to something or the other. And we have a legion of failures that we're seeing. So we want to get to all of those.
We certainly aren't talking about true leadership or genuine leadership. We're just most of this episode, imagine us using our finger quotes when we say the word leadership, because one, we know it isn't Joe Biden. Two, a lot of the people in these positions, they aren't really leaders. And three, a lot of the people running for office coming up here in November, they aren't leaders either, which, boy, what a rough position to be in as a nation when the vast majority of people who want the leadership role and position aren't qualified for it. Yikes.
When the biggest and the best pitch that any politician has is Richard Gere from Officer and a Gentleman. You have nowhere else to go. It's not a strong sell. And you mentioned the human Roomba at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Still, for all intents and purposes, the most powerful human who has ever been on Earth, Joe Biden. So, first story,
Most votes ever, don't you know, Steve?
more than Barack Obama.
Sure. Because who doesn't believe that?
This comes from friend of the Suspendables, Miranda Devine, writing in the New York Post a couple weeks ago. Who exactly is running the country? Certainly appears to be Jill Biden and not Joe, the necromancer who is in the First Lady.
Good
is
word.
running the shots at the cabinet meeting, which Miranda talked about. But the background for it, and I didn't even know this, how that Joe Biden wound up hosting these dignitaries not at the White House. So recently, President Biden made the prime ministers of India, Japan, and Australia go to Wilmington, Delaware for the annual meeting of the Quad, a partnership designed to keep an increasingly aggressive China in check. At least the Quad leaders got an individual tour of Joe's palatial estate. But why was this important meeting being held in Wilmington at all? The White House patched together a story about Biden wanting to show off his hometown. Never had the urge before. Quite honestly, there's not much to show off. Sorry, any
No.
American Radicals podcast viewers, audience members who live in Wilmington, Delaware. Miranda Devine's words, not mine. I haven't ever visited.
No, me either. I wonder if they found any classified documents in the trunk of his Corvette, or I guess those are all like in storage somewhere now. But
Well, he did tell the special prosecutor that it made vroom vroom sounds, so
Vroom.
I'm sure he was anxious to share that with them. So more likely, other than the I want to show you all, do an episode of Cribs, MTV Cribs from Wilmington as the president. More likely, it was that the White House was already booked out for the self-aggrandizement of the relentlessly ambitious First Lady. Jill Biden was hosting a glitzy party for the cast of The West Wing and the first ever back-to-school night at the White House. Later, at Joe's first cabinet meeting in 11 months, he brought in Jill to sit down at the head of the table as if she were running the show. So that's the type of leadership that we're seeing at the top. And when I say that, that Joe Biden is the most powerful person in the history of the world, I think that's pretty clear, right? I mean, with every iteration, every evolution of president of the United States, as the country is in a decline, but is still the most powerful military and new weaponry and new technological advancements. It's safe to say that every president subsequently is more powerful than the one before them because they have those abilities at their fingertips. Joe Biden's the most powerful human being in history.
I mean, it's awfully frightening, isn't it? That Joe Biden, as defunct as he is, I mean, you're right. Like, I can't argue with it. Is America? We're still number one. We're holding on by a thread. But I also can't help it but think of some of the Old Testament prophets again. I think I mentioned it on the show. If I didn't, I know I mentioned it on my Substack, shameless plug, lastline.substack.com, recently, that at my church we're going through the book of Habakkuk, and I know I told you this offline. The Habakkuk's complaints are the complaints of a whistleblower, like plain and simple. Read the first verses of Habakkuk 1, and you'll see. But I also think of some of the other ones where they had weak kings, and they're proclaiming like, "Hey, we need justice, we need righteousness, we need to turn back to what is good," and they don't, and the nation gets punished for it, and sometimes, in really bad, gets put in really bad situations. And I really can't help but see the parallels to America today. Like we're running rampant towards carnality and paganism and, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, boastful pride of life. We're headed there writ large, left and right and center, and fringe on, like there's not many out there who are truly trying to seek after true righteousness and put themselves to the side and say what would truly be best for my nation. Even put it in a little more modern context. What did John F. Kennedy say? The liberal of liberals, the loved Democrat from all sides. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Are we seeing that anywhere today? I don't see it. And quite frankly, I wouldn't recommend it either. I was listening to a podcast earlier this morning, and it was a guy, a Navy guy on it. And they asked him, what would you say to people who want to serve? And he took a different take than I did. I wouldn't recommend it. And I don't like my take. I want to encourage people to serve this country, but if I'm speaking truthfully, how could I encourage you to do that when we are so off the rails in so many ways? And then what, especially in the military? Yeah, go join it so they can put you through the meat grinder and kill you in Ukraine. Like, I don't recommend that.
And we've fundamentally inverted ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country to what are you going to give me?
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to give me as a citizen? Because we've gotten so many people in the welfare roles, and we're getting more and more illegal aliens coming in that are getting more than the actual citizens at this point. And this is a good transition from the current occupant at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to those endeavoring to get there. But before we wave bye-bye to old Joe, reminded of the leadership failures, not just at the helm, but coming from Washington, D.C., but around the country. And we always default back to it because it was such a great example of failures from leaders, failures from citizens, failures in general across the country. And that was coronavirus, the nation's response to it, where it was completely illogical. And that led to tyranny from the top all the way to the bottom. And we were weighed, measured, and found wanting in so many regards. It was such a great example that's why we always sort of defer back to it. And I was thinking about what sort of got me and you and others like us really targeted for purging, and that was the vaccine mandates. And I had the video, just about a minute, of the announcement coming from Joe Biden after he had failed in the Afghanistan withdrawal. They had to immediately change subject because it was pretty much agreement across all political spectrum that was an utter failure, and it was universally just a stain on the country. There was nobody that was standing up saying like Joe Biden did a great job, except for, I don't know, Karine Jean-Pierre, or I probably was Ginger Goebbels, Jen Psaki at the time. But they had to get us back to red versus blue, and that's why they pivoted and went to the vaccine mandate. So this is the announcement from Joe Biden that he's going to be doing that.
Highly contagious Delta variant that I began to warn America about back in July spread late summer like it did in other countries before us. While the vaccines provide strong protection for the vaccinated, we read about and hear about and we see the stories of hospitalized people on their deathbeds among the unvaccinated over the past few weeks. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And it's caused by the fact that despite America having unprecedented and successful vaccination program, despite the fact that for almost 5 months, free vaccines have been available in 80,000 different locations, we still have nearly 80 million Americans who have failed to get the shot. And to make matters worse, there are elected officials actively working to undermine the fight against COVID-19. Instead of encouraging people to get vaccinated and mask up, they're ordering mobile morgues for the unvaccinated dying from COVID in their communities. This is totally unacceptable.
Dude, there is so much there.
The absolute patronizing and lies coming out of his mouth. And I can't get beyond how much he has cognitively declined in 3 years.
Right. It's crazy to see. And I mean, and you could see it there even just in kind of his speech pattern that he's an old man. You can tell. and he has gotten markedly worse since then. But dude, there's so much there. Like, just when he says free, no, they're not. They're not free. Like, okay, sure, you can show up at the location site and get it, and you're not paying anything. But they were far from free, and the taxpayer was laden with the burden of that, and not just the cost of the vaccine itself, but so many other costs that go into that. Like for instance, even popping, those pop-up sites. The companies that do those, they're getting paid, and they're getting paid handsomely. Or work.
The free element to it, I think, is pretty revealing of how people like Joe Biden, communists like him, view the public, right? Well, it's free to you. This is always the way I get you to do what I want, is just say, well, it's free, and you plebeian swine, you consumers, you just mouth breathers will just take whatever is free. So just do what I say.
Mhm.
That's the utter disdain that he has for people who he purports to represent, who he purports to stand in the gap to defend, because this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
I mean, that's the big one that stands out, a pandemic of the unvaccinated. In my experience, everybody got COVID, unvaccinated or not. And in my experience, the people who got COVID the worst were vaccinated. So, again, why are we even calling it that? Why are we calling it a vaccine? It's not. At best, it was a therapeutic, but I think, especially looking back now, it didn't even do that. If anything, it made matters worse for the vaccinated. And you could find the articles today, even in the mainstream, they'll say, well, COVID also causes, blood clots. Well, does it? Is it the COVID that causes that, or is it the COVID vaccine?
It's long COVID, right? That
Right.
just means you got vaccine injured.
Right.
So
Yeah.
to transition off of Biden to his perhaps successors, and that's Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who are running. And there was an interesting piece that I found over from the Mises Institute where it talks about them being potentially like the ticket of COVID tyranny, as they're labeled, which I think is probably pretty fair. So it goes back into each one of their history recently, at least during coronavirus, and talks about the examples of what their leadership was and their leadership failures were. So 2021, Biden administration attempted to wield OSHA, as we showed you from the video. The mandate was struck down 6-3 by the Supreme Court a year later, but they basically withdrew it before they could set a precedent. So, as revealed by the Twitter files, the Biden administration would request that Twitter either ban or artificially reduce the reach of certain accounts. In a 2021 vaccine drive in South Carolina, Harris stated, quote, "So the vaccine, let me say it again, are safe. They are safe and they are free and they are effective. And it is that simple. If you are vaccinated, you are protected. If your community is vaccinated, COVID rates in your community will go down," unquote. She also supported vaccines for children aged 5 to 11.
Golly.
Now, her partner in crime, Hughes very specifically, Tim A. Walz, coming from the land of 1,000 genders in Minnesota, he issued a stay-at-home order while governor to prevent the spread of coronavirus. He also established a COVID hotline where people could call and report anyone who wasn't following his edicts.
Good German alert. Good German alert.
When he was asked about removing the hotline, he said, "We're not going to take down a phone number that people can call to keep their families safe." In June of 2020, Walz issued a mask mandate, quote, "Right now, there's no better way to demonstrate our Minnesotan values than by wearing a mask," unquote.
Dude.
Those are the folks who want to be the most powerful people in the world ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's documented what they did. This was not ancient history. They haven't evolved. They haven't changed their thinking. They've never disavowed a single bit of that. It's recent history. And they are a couple of weeks away from potentially ascending to the top of the federal government for the United States.
For these reasons alone, I really will. I can't understand how anybody, because I look at it like this. If you are in America, I would like to believe that you love America. I would like to believe that you love freedom and that you love American principles and values. Like, I don't know, the Bill of Rights, perhaps. Maybe even just not even any of the additional amendments that have been added since the Bill of Rights was first, written and signed. But let's just take the first 10, and maybe you ought to love those. But then, and I know I mentioned it the other day, like I'm starting to see all these Harris Waltz signs in my area, and I think this reason alone, right here, like Kamala Harris said, they're free, effective, and there was one other word she said, and it's like all three of those things are not true.
Safe.
Safe, free, and effective. All that's 3 lies right there. 3 lies. And we should put her up on a higher pedestal than she's already on. And Tim Walz, literally saying we're not taking down the hotline for you to rat out your neighbors for trying to do America, even in a time of quote unquote pandemic. Like, let's think about this rationally. We all lived through it. We all lived through the COVID era. Like, are you safe? Were you safe? Do you think your neighbors should have been able to have a dinner party or not? Do you think Americans should be able to make choices on their own without the government having a hotline and us having to fear the government stormtroopers being called? It was Minnesota too, where law enforcement officers are marching down the street shooting paintball guns at people out on their porches to enforce the curfew. One, you should never be in law enforcement. Two, how dare you? Like, you're a good German too. Like, this is America still, I thought. But the land of 1,000 genders. It's yeah. Go ahead and shoot up the citizens you're supposed to protect.
I think I do need to correct you though. I believe they were pepper balls, so worse, and they were coming from the National Guard, which the governor commands and was a command sergeant major of. And he gave himself emergency powers that required a Democrat-run House in Minnesota to partner with a Republican-run Senate to remove from him 18 months later. That's the sort of tyranny that we saw from Tim Walz in Minnesota. Now, we can transition away from the electoral politics, the horse race that everybody's talking about, because there are a lot of other failures here. And I saw these 2 military examples that I wanted to throw at Garrett. Don't worry, Garrett. I know you bleed green, so I left the Army away. I'm sure that these sorts of things would never happen in that branch of service. But the one example I did find first came from the Naval Academy. Well, it's the Navy and officers, right? They're a bunch of tweebs. Like, they're probably all named Milton. Naval Academy says considering race in admission strengthens the military. These are the leaders of tomorrow that are being shaped at the Naval Academy, and the leaders of today who are forming this policy. Attorneys for the U.S. Naval Academy say the officer training school should be allowed to continue using race as an admission. So they've been caught on it. Because
and they double down. They double down instead.
Prioritizing diversity in military makes it stronger. Is that why you wear a uniform?
Right.
Because diversity is a thing. It makes it stronger, more effective, and more widely respected. Naval Academy's current admissions process considers many factors, including grades, extracurricular activities, life experience, and socioeconomic status, according to court testimony. Race often plays no role in the process, but sometimes it comes under consideration in a limited fashion, attorneys for the Academy wrote. They actually put that on paper in court documents.
Dude, again, we've got this is a trend today, Steve. We got 3 lies again, and it's a trend in that I forgot one of them. It's stronger, more effective, and then there was one other thing.
Widely respected.
All false. I mean, all false right there. Like, dude, and like you said, they put it on paper. Stronger, more effective, and more widely respected. In what world? In what world? Like that.
If you prioritize immutable characteristics like the color of your skin or the genitals swinging between your legs, by definition, you cannot have the strongest potential force or the most effective potential force. And if you're not as strong or effective as you could be, you're not going to be as respected as you should be because your priorities are out of whack. The top priority should be to have the strongest, most effective force by using the best people.
That's right. Well, last week when we were traveling, and really kind of since I've been home, I've been back in my old habit of podcasts, like how I used to listen to. Like, I'm not listening to as many like political themed ones or anything. I'm listening to ones like about they've got guests on from SEAL Team 6 or from the Delta Force or whatever, Army, whatever stuff that like I've listened to for years and kind of have just kind of moved away from. But it's been good for me again lately. But you hear all these guys to a man talk about like the selection process for whatever unit they came from, and it's always merit based. Nobody cares about your race. Nobody cares about your gender. Who's going to be best for the job? And we've established criteria to get there, whether it's, Army Green Berets or, any of the other ones I named. They're all a little bit different, but they all have this process that you don't even take into consideration any DEI standard. And it's just absurd that an institution like the Naval Academy would put it on paper. It's very similar to this lawsuit we just saw over the weekend from the Department of freaking Justice, by the way. So you're all paying for it, where they found that, I think it was in Maryland, there was, I think it was Maryland, I don't know, some sort of, the number of black females who were not making the grade was disproportionately separate from every other subcategory of human. And so the Department of Justice sued on their behalf because it was racist, when it's like, no, everybody takes the same test, everybody has the same standard. And actually that's not even true when it comes to law enforcement in a physical sense. Everybody doesn't have the same standard. Men and women have different standards, which makes no sense either, because guess what, everybody, when you're getting in a tussle with a bad guy, they're not going to go easier on you because you had to do less push-ups than I did. Sorry, that's not how the real world works.
So you're telling me that they won't slow down when they're running because they see that you fit the demographic of a potential police officer who doesn't run as fast as another demographic?
Yes, correct. And you know what, Steve, that's the same in the military too. So it's the same at the Naval Academy or West Point or wherever.
Yeah.
Men and women have different physical standards, which it's like in a world where you need the best, like the military, because what's a military's core objective? To go
Break
shoot people
things.
in the face.
Break things,
Yeah.
kill people, hurt feelings.
But, oh no, let's just make it DEI centric because
So that was the Naval Academy. Those would be naval ensigns when they graduate. So they're officer ranks. So similar to that, this is about the Air Force. And this is about them purging particular racial groups from the ranks of Air Force officers. New documents. So this is actually on paper. Air Force's goal to reduce white male population joining the officer ranks. So this is a slideshow. I guess it's a PowerPoint. You know the military. If you take down, you don't need to take down, troops. You just need to take down PowerPoint, and it will probably be rendered combat ineffective. One of the slides in question, labeled AFROTC white, depicts a graph that shows the percentage of white male ROTC officers applicants declining from 60% in 2019 to a projected 50% in 2023. So 10% decline in 4 years. The graph further details how the Air Force's goal is to reduce the percentage down to 43% in another 5 years in 2029, and denotes it with a star that says achieved goal.
Wow.
In a separate set of documents from as early as 2022, Air Force outlines its efforts to modify ROTC scholarship programs. The Air Force suggests modifying the scholarship models could remove certain, quote, testing barriers to entry for underrepresented groups. The diversity plans extend to this other program, this third, outside of the ROTC. This program is called Aim High Flight Academy. It's an aviation scholarship program for high school ROTC and Air Force Academy students, according to the documents. Air Force notes that the Aim High Flight Academy applicant pool should be made up of a minimum of 60% underrepresented groups, further noting that it must be at least 35% minorities. I don't know the difference between underrepresented and minority, but those are setting standards that by default, again, you're not going to have the most qualified pool because you're putting immutable characteristics ahead of just simple merit.
Yeah. As you're going through that, I was thinking of, wasn't there a recent Supreme Court case regarding affirmative action in college admissions where the Supreme Court said, yeah, you can't do that because
Harvard and the Naval Academy or the military academies are separate because of their connection to the government in some way.
Okay.
So they're
'Cause it
going to have to do it again.
dude. Ho I mean, it should be a foregone conclusion that the Supreme Court, even in this crazy woke-centric cult that we live in as a nation today, I still think the Supreme Court, because it's the same Supreme Court that ruled on this case we just mentioned, is gonna say, no, you can't do that. That's racist against mostly against white people, but against others." And it's like, even to set these metrics, 60% here, 43% there,
Just completely arbitrary. It's almost
completely
like it's
arbitrary.
arbitrary and despotic
Mm,
abuse of power.
what would that be? Huh. Hmm. Longtime listeners to the show already know the answer is tyranny. That's the definition. But these agencies, every single one of these arms of the government just plow ahead. F you. We're going to just do it arbitrarily because, hey, we are tyrants and we're not even going to try to hide it. I mean, that's how you know that you are either entering into a totalitarian state or you're already there, is when they don't hide it anymore. And that's where we're at. They're not trying to hide it.
Well, we're talking about, for the most part, actually all of today, I believe they're all executive branch, right? You're talking about president of the United States, vice president, a governor from the state of a land of a thousand genders, all executives, military, same thing. I do think we should throw some shade over at the bench, at the judicial branch, because the leadership that you would expect there from someone who's appointed, it's a lifetime appointment to the federal bench, correct? You would think that they would demonstrate at least a modicum of common sense when they render their opinions, which have significant weight on the way we operate on a day-to-day basis, because we're sort of a precedent centered society, right? Once the judge says that we give this unbelievable amount of power to people who wear black robes, at least they should wear white wigs just so we could completely see how
Yeah,
ridiculous a lot
like
of it
they
is.
still do across the pond.
Or they do in Canada, I think.
Yeah.
So this comes from the Post Millennial, and it's about a federal judge. And let's see if we can't find what the problem could be here. The judge forces Indiana to pay for sex change operation for a convicted baby killer. And for those who are watching, I'm going to scroll down off of the headline so you can just see a picture of the judge next
Oh
to this
my
defendant.
gosh, dude.
Okay. For those listening, that's a full-on face tattoo on the defendant next to a robed gentleman with glasses that look like his first name should be Milton.
Yes, he
So
does.
the
Like
judge-
Milton. Yeah, honestly, Milton, based on that picture alone, it's like, oh yeah, that guy looks reasonable. Obviously, he's not.
So this is Southern Indiana, the District Court for Southern Indiana, U.S. District Court, federal judge. His name is Richard Young. He ruled that the name is Autumn Corleone, born Jonathan Richardson, was a victim of cruel and unusual punishment. Well, Garrett, I mean, you are a fan of those first 10 amendments.
I
Let's
sure
see
am.
what they could be. It was a
Eighth Amendment, everybody.
violation of Autumn Corleone, formerly known as Jonathan Richardson's Eighth Amendment, when a gender transition surgery was denied, according to the ACLU, who
Dude,
brought suit.
this is insane, Steve. This is insane.
The judge assessed that an operation was, quote, medically necessary, and that denying the inmate the procedure was a violation of rights under the 8th and 14th Amendment, which respectively ban cruel and unusual punishment and guarantee equal application of the law to all citizens. Equal application of the law being that, I guess, the taxpayers pay for you to get surgery, whether or not you're incarcerated or not. You have to square that circle for me,
Dude,
Your Honor. The
Yeah.
prisoner is in jail with a 55-year sentence for murdering an 11-month-old girl, Corleone's own stepdaughter, in September 2001. So Mr. Richardson has suddenly had a change of mind that he wants to be a girl now. So this happened in 2001. Corleone had been left to care for the 11-month-old. The cause of death was ruled as manual strangulation. After being incarcerated, Richardson began identifying as transgender as well as taking synthetic estrogen, all courtesy of the taxpayer in Indiana.
Mhm. You know what? This is Indiana.
I'll take this picture down. I'm sorry.
You know, like this is not Los Angeles County, or New York City. This is Indiana, of all places. And you got face tatted guy who's just been trying to get away with whatever he wants his entire life. Now suddenly he's incarcerated and wants to be a woman. Like, also what's crazy is throughout the history of human beings, the cruel and unusual punishment piece would be if you made a guy into a eunuch. For those of you who don't know, that's when you get your genitalia chopped off so you can't sleep with the queen. So you like, this is how backwards we are, where now it's cruel and unusual punishment to not give him the gender affirming care that he wants. Like, we're totally inverted as far as justice goes
Oh,
at this point.
as it pertains to the rainbow kamikaze, the LGBTQAI plus underscore hashtag $, we are completely inverted. I mean, we're at the point now where they say like, "Hey, you're a man, prove it. Go kiss him."
Yeah,
That's where
like,
we're at right now. Like it's not just, "Hey, keep the government out of your bedroom if it doesn't pick my pocket or break my leg," and it's picking your pocket with these procedures and
mhm.
increasingly breaking your leg as you seeing sexual assaults in the street from these people. But what difference is it to me? Well, that's out the window. Now you must not only say that's okay, not only cheer it on and wear the ribbon and attend the parades, but now the next one is mandatory compulsory participation in it. Like,
Mhm.
why aren't you getting the chop?
Yep. Yep. I saw this video on Twitter recently within the last few days. I don't know
Don't
how old the video
dead
was.
name a social media site.
Oh,
So
sorry,
insensitive.
Elon. X. But it was like a LGBTQ centric thing, and these women are marching in the well, maybe there were men there too. I don't know, but you can imagine the type. Then they're chanting, "We're here, we're queer, we're coming for your kids," and I'm like,
That was a choir. It was a men's gay choir that sung a song about that as well. But yeah, the marching and it was the same thing. And they will articulate. I'm sure the ACLU will get out there saying like, "Well, they're coming for your children to teach them the ways of acceptance and
yeah,
tolerance." It's like,
sure,
no, they can't procreate, so they're
right,
just going to recruit,
yeah, they're
not
gonna
to
co-opt,
mention partake
yes,
with the children.
right. Which, if you didn't know this, spoiler alert, in the gay community, oftentimes it starts with preying on younger people. That's often how people turn gay or become gay or think they're gay or whatever. And it's I don't know why it's so pervasive. I have my theories. Of course, they're rooted in biblical doctrine of how with sexual deviancy, it's very similar, but for because when it comes to sex related issues, it becomes more deviant, but it's very similar to any other addiction. You need more, you need different, you need the next type of high, and it seemingly always ends with pedophilia. I don't know why. My belief is that it's because it's satanic at its core, and of all sins, the Bible says the man who commits sexual sins against himself. There's not other sins that I'm aware of where the Bible explicitly says it's also a sin against yourself, and so I think that's why it's rooted in this sexual deviancy, uh, because it can be so pervasive and so satanic and evil down the road. It's a crucial tool for Satan to blind the eyes of unbelievers and steer them towards the world. And but this marching and this chanting for that, they're telling you straight up, we're coming for your kids. We're here, we're queer, we're coming for your kids. And it, like Steve mentioned, in the 90s it was, oh, just, it's adults consent, no big deal, don't ask, don't tell.
They just want visitation at the hospital.
And it's like, no, that's how these death cults always have functioned. It's we're gonna start slow, and now they're bashing you over the head with a baseball bat if you don't participate.
I sort of share your sentiment about it being there's a satanic element to it, but even like of this earth, the fact that there's a coping mechanism that I think happens with a lot of young boys that are sexually exploited and
Oh, for
abused
sure, for
and
sure.
molested, that then they just say it's easier for me as opposed to saying I was a victim to say I wanted it to happen.
I accept this, yeah.
And I think that that is part and to prey on that element is so abhorrent that there's a place in South Hell for
Mhm.
those individuals who bring them in. And then you talk about like you need more, you need more, you need more. And I can't help but notice that when the monkeypox jumped from man to beast, it was in a man relationship, not a female relationship,
Right.
because they're both the gas pedal. There's no brake involved in that one, and I
Mhm.
felt really bad for that greyhound. Um, anyway, let's go back to the executive branch, and then this is also along the lines of the rainbow kamikaze. It comes from the really weird political state of Kentucky. Andy Bashir, who, from what I understand, the Bashir family is sort of like royalty in the state of Kentucky. Like maybe his dad or somebody was a governor, so it's just a very known name. Which again, be careful who you're electing because of their name. Wasn't there a
Right.
whole Eddie Murphy movie on that where he just had a name that sounded like the whole other congressman, so that's how he got elected? That was a comedy from like the 80s. But Andy Bashir is really, really all about chopping off the genitals of children. So this comes from the AP. Governor bans use of conversion therapy on LGBTQ plus minors in Kentucky. And language is important
Yep.
because
You know,
conversion therapy is not what it should
yeah,
be.
right, right. And we've talked about this before, Steve. We said, and we're not prophets, as in the sense of we're telling you what's going to happen in the future. Maybe we're prophets in the sense of we will proclaim the truth to you. But we've talked about this before. I wish I had a better brain because I would be able to spit it out. But we've talked about conversion therapy in regards to Canada, America's hat, and how it's banned there. And we have said on this program, it's coming here. Well, look, it's here. It's in Kentucky.
Kentucky, which elected Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell. So I don't know what the heck is going on
Yeah,
down
no
there.
kidding.
So conversion therapy means that if a boy says, I think I'm a girl, then you must affirm that. That's called gender affirmation, even though it's changing. And conversion therapy is when a boy says, I think I'm a girl, you say, no, son, you're still a boy, ergo keeping him the same gender. But according to the language of the communists, that's conversion therapy. So, Democratic Governor Andy Bashir banned the use of conversion therapy on minors in Kentucky, calling his executive order, he did it by fiat, executive order, a necessary step to protect children from a widely discredited practice that tries to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity through counseling. So, it's widely discredited that if you counsel a boy that no, you are in fact a boy, that is discredited. The order also makes it illegal to use state or federal funds to provide the therapy on minors and authorizes licensing boards to discipline professionals found to have practiced conversion therapy on minors to have practiced. So my question is, does it go backwards?
Hmm.
But because
Sounds
it's
like it.
definitely going forward. So if at any point in your history you said, yes, young man, I know you realize that you're a girl, or you believe you're a girl, but you're really a boy because we all saw kindergarten cops and boys have penises and girls have vaginas. That would put you in jeopardy of losing your license. So this is where we're really going. You ready? Set your O'Boyle meter to 0, Garrett.
I know. I've been dialing it back this whole time because this is.
No. I gotta set it.
Oh
Set
boy,
it to
oh boy,
0.
oh boy, it's gonna get worse.
Quote from Andy Bashir,
Oh no.
governor of Kentucky. Quote, my family teaches me that all children are children of God.
Oh boy.
And where practices are endangering or even harming those children, we must act. The practice of so-called conversion therapy hurts our children.
Dude. Thank you for the forewarning, Steve.
South
Because
Hell?
I
South
would
Hell.
be, I would be screaming. I would be literally yelling if you hadn't. It's interesting because as we're on this topic, I had a verse for the end, and I'll probably stick with it because I'm just going to throw this in here now. Romans 1. How do you go anywhere else?
Besides Isaiah 6:8, it's a suspendable favor.
Yeah. Romans 1. Honestly, it's verses 18 through 32, I think. I won't read the whole thing. Like, seriously, go read it on your own. But verse 24, I think I popped it up there. Yeah, I
Yep,
did. Okay.
very good.
Verse 24 says, therefore, God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature, and the men likewise gave up natural relations with women, and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men, and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error, which many Bible scholars believe is AIDS. Hey, maybe in the modern era, it's also monkeypox, like we touched on. But the point is this: when someone like Andy Bashir, dude, I don't think they understand the depths of hell that they will be sent to if they don't turn from their wicked ways, and they're invoking God to put a rubber stamp of purity on a wicked law like this. Because guess what's happening with this law too? It's you most places who do quote unquote conversion therapy are churches, they're houses of God. And guess what,
Christian
everybody?
therapists.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, Muslim, Islamic clerics, same type of deal, because it's wrong in that religion too. And but what it boils down to is this: like, when you invoke God for evil, watch out. Watch out. I mean, plain and simple. Like that, as gracious and loving as God is, his justice is should be equally frightening. Like, if you think about God's love, the awe that should bring you, it should be remarkable. Likewise, and conversely, his judgment. And when you're going to invoke God like that to try to say how righteous this evil law is, you're in a bad place. And I know we've talked about it a lot here too. Romans 13. One of the sections in Romans 13 says that the government does not bear the sword in vain, that they're there to punish evil and reward good. Well, again, it's flipped on its head. And a law like this, and then the governor invoking God to say that this is good. Ooh, man. Woe to you. I forget the exact verse. It's somewhere in Isaiah. It says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. I mean, dude, if that's not where we're at, it's insane, man. It's crazy.
And I want to transition to another governor who maybe was on the list with Mr. Bashir, probably higher up on the list, but he had a problem with his name, at least, or his purported ideology or religiosity, and that's Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania, which is why the communists can't pick him, because they have a problem with Jews. But that's not the issue here. I want to talk about Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania meeting with Vladimir Zelensky, the leader of the last bastion of liberty and freedom and democracy, who canceled his elections and imprisoned journalists who spoke out against him. Because do you remember back during the Trump administration, there was this impeachment that they had? And the first one was about this phone call. And the phrase we kept hearing was quid pro quo.
Mm-hmm.
This for that. And I always like to hear the media explain that every single time. That's the quid. What's the quo? So let's play that back again. Let's say we invite the leader of the last bastion of liberty to America to come to a ceremony where we autograph a bunch of bombs, right? And we fly him here on military jets paid for by the United States taxpayer, right? And he gets to come here and he's going to get billions of dollars. That's the quid. What's the quo? Could it be that he appears at a ceremony with Shapiro and then says that the rival to Shapiro's party can't be elected because that would be bad for his country? So this actually comes from the state of Pennsylvania's website. Governor Shapiro welcomes Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky to Scranton Army. Never trust anybody who has two Y's in a row in their last name. During the visit, Zelensky spoke with workers at SCAAP, that's the U.S. Army's Joint Munitions Command facility that manufactures large caliber metal projectiles and mortar projectiles for the U.S. Department of Defense, and thanked them for their efforts. They specifically build 155 millimeter howitzer rounds, some of the most vital equipment for Ukraine's defense. The United States Department of Defense announced in December 2022 it was expanding the US-led training for the Ukrainian armed forces. U.S. program will train up to 1 Ukrainian battalion per month and will help develop the skills of Ukrainian units in specialized equipment. So we're going to train them and equip them and spend lots of money and treasure doing it so that we can get a nice endorsement from a guy who we've hyped up as being this great leader, the Winston Churchill of our time, who at one point played chopsticks with his penis.
No kidding. It
Who's in charge? Who is in charge? The worst people are in charge.
The worst, the absolute worst. People who hate you. Like they literally hate you. If you live in North Carolina or Tennessee right now, they really hate you. Which they're not hiding, because look at what the FEMA has been spending money on. Look at what the vice president, who wants to be the president, just said, $127 million to Lebanon. But hey, if you backwoods people in Appalachia, screw you. We don't actually care if you die. And then Ukraine. I mean, it's been years now of this. But also, I think back to when just recently, within the last, week or two, Zelensky was with Trump. And what was his deal? He looked like somebody had kicked his dog or pissed in his Cheerios the whole time. And then he goes out here and, basically campaigning for AWOLs and Harris on your dollar, because a mil air flight from Ukraine to here to get him here. Oh, dude, it's like, where's the election interference investigation on this one, FBI?
It is one of the most disturbing mental exercises that I've gone through that I can remember, was the suggestion that my federal government is actively withholding aid to my fellow citizens who are hurricane victims for electoral reasons, so that enough of them will die that Kamala Harris can win North Carolina. And when that was suggested and I didn't immediately dismiss it, that was a yo moment.
Yep. I saw you tweet this yesterday. You sent it, in our back channels. And I was like, dang, dude's got a point there, because I've been thinking that too. And it didn't even register with me. Like, oh, I'm not even out of hand dismissing this thought as just irrational, because that's where we're at. Like, as America, Steve, as the land of the free, allegedly, this is where we're at, where it's like, I think the government's just letting those people die. That's crazy, dude. Or it used to be. Not so much anymore.
We got one more example, and it's not federal, it's localized, but it's also coming from America's most important city, and that's New York City. And I saw this one, and it has to be discussed, because it didn't get any attention, and it blew my mind. And that comes from the New York Post. So we started and ending with the New York Post. What happens in Disney stays in Disney. New York City educrats took own kids to Magic Kingdom on trips meant for homeless students. So 6 Department of Education employees used forged permission slips to take their own kids and grandkids to Disney on and other city-funded trips meant for homeless students. Linda Wilson, Queens supervisor of DOE's Students in Temporary Housing, took her own 2 daughters on trips and encouraged colleagues to take their sons, daughters, and grandkids, but tried to cover up the shady practice when the special commissioner of investigation, kind of like their inspector general, started asking questions. Quote, "What happens here stays with us," Wilson allegedly told her coworkers. "She told us to lie to the investigators." Wilson and other staffers used the names of homeless students to fabricate permission slips, then forged parents' signatures on the paperwork. The city paid for the trips with $300,000 in federal funds. So we all paid for it.
Oh,
so I don't know why you're taking homeless kids to Disney as opposed to trying to upgrade their, living situation or their clothing, or get them coats for the winter. Like, I could see that being an effort you might want to go through as a local government. Disney seems kind of like, hey, sorry, you're homeless. There's Mickey Mouse. It seems kind of a fleeting thing that you would give and offer, but it goes, it prints really well on the Morning Post, right? And reading through that, they actually did other things, like we're taking them to go visit college campuses. We're going to go up to Syracuse.
Oh.
And they went and ate lunch on the campus of Syracuse and then immediately left and went to Niagara Falls. She just traversed the country and went on vacations.
On your tax dollars. I think.
Where's the federal case on that?
Seriously. 100%. Where is it? Where is it? That there should be a case on all these people for this. And, it's buried in a New York Post story somewhere. And I would be stunned if anything ever came of this, if anybody was ever held responsible. But the piece I love the most is these educrats, as it called them in the headline. Those are the type of, liberal Karen or like white dude for Harris who would
saw one of those flying, by the way,
dude.
with the T-shirt and the with the Panama Jack hat.
Oh,
like
gosh.
morbidly obese. It was just perfect.
Yeah, of course. But those are the first type of people who would say, we got to take care of the homeless. And then behind the scenes, they're going to take their own kids on a trip and forge documentation and then tell you to lie about it on top of it. Or I think of the people, in the right around the lake that we live by with the Harris Waltz signs. Those are the type of people too that would, I imagine, that would do this type of thing. Or what was this? Maybe probably within the last decade. The details are fleeting from me, but there was some scandal with lots of prestigious universities where well-to-do people were just basically paying extra to get their kids.
For Operation Varsity Blues from the FBI, where they got Aunt Becky on a bribe to get her kid into USC. That was an FBI case.
Really?
But these educrats ask not what your country can do for you.
That's right.
Ask what the country can pay for you to do with your kids at Disney.
Right.
Be more specific. We'll give you. We'll make sure that we route that to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a really good palate cleanse. But Garrett, you have any closing thoughts? I know you went into Romans, but we'll send to you.
I do. I'm kind of second guessing it because I was like, I wanted to be a little more hopeful at the end of this. So I'll stick with it to bring a little bit of hope. Isaiah 32, the artificial heading is, a king will reign in righteousness. And boy, wouldn't that be nice? That's what we want. That's what we should seek. That's what we would like to have. It says, behold, a king will reign in righteousness and princes will rule in justice. Just that right there, verse 1. That sounds great. That sounds like America of old. That sounds like what our founders wanted to build, what they wanted to make, and what we had maybe for a short time. Doesn't seem like we have it anymore. But it goes on. It says, each will be like a hiding place from the wind, a shelter from the storm, like streams of water in a dry place, like the shade of a great rock in a weary land. Then the eyes of those who see will not be closed, and the ears of those who hear will give attention. The heart of the hasty will understand and know, and the tongue of the stammerers will hasten to speak distinctly. The fool will no more be called noble, nor the scoundrel said to be honorable. For the fool speaks folly, and his heart is busy with iniquity, to practice ungodliness, to utter error concerning the Lord, to leave the craving of the hungry unsatisfied, and to deprive the thirsty of drink. You can go read the rest on your own. You know what? It is actually uplifting. I'm glad I stuck with it. And it's something we can all work towards. It's something that starts in our personal lives with trying to do what is right, picking up your cross and following after Jesus. That's where it starts. That's where it ends. That's what we need to get back to as a country. And over to you, Steve, for this palate cleanse.
Again, I want to leave everybody with a nice laugh off into their day. So we talk about leadership. Let's talk about some laissez-faire leadership from one Ron Swanson.
Oh, the best.
The Human Resources Department requires that I be available once a month to discuss workplace disputes with my employees. The rules do not specify whether or not I'm allowed to listen to Willie Nelson on my headphones.
And Kyle parked his car in my spot again. Now, that is the 4th time this month.
Hello, Wall.
I'm sorry, everybody makes mistakes. He looks at me. He thinks he's...
How'd things go for you?
The less I know about other people's affairs, the happier I am. I'm not interested in caring about people. I once worked with a guy for 3 years and never learned his name. Best friend I ever had. We still never talk sometimes.
See how it works?
What about my office and its many walls?
That becomes a new public waiting room. You're going to be more accessible than ever.
Excuse me. There's a sign at Ramsett Park that says, "Do not drink the sprinkler water," so I made sun tea with it, and now I have an infection. Sir? Sir, are you listening to me, sir? Sir, I'm talking to you! Sir!
Ron Swanson for president.
The GOAT. He's my spirit animal.
All right, guys. Hope that was enjoyable for you today as it was for us. We're always pleasure to be here with you on Rumble, rumble.com/amradpod. Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. We'll be back with you, hopefully, if Milton doesn't take me out down here. But I don't know. He sounds kind of like a weakling. I think we'll be just fine. Back Thursday, 08:30 is the time. Until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.